Welcome to Grace Pilled, where we explore the infinitude of God by talking about God, within God, aka interviews with people spanning the vastness of the spiritual path. My name is Hanna, and I will be your guide. I've been studying and practicing in a classical Shakta tantric tradition since 2015 under the guidance of my guru, and I just love exploring all of the ways that God wakes up within our own dream through the guise of individual people on this earth. For the past few years, I've been working professionally as a guide, offering one-on-one mentorship, giving talks, and teaching courses. If you ever want to connect with me more deeply, you can book a call through my website or join my Patreon, which is the home of my massive library of talks that I've given over the years. All of that information is in the description. But enough about me. Let's talk about our guest. Today, I am joined by Meredith Graves, musician, writer, and lifelong student of not only magic and all things Western esotericism, but a deep devotee of my favorite things, awe and wonder. Now, Meredith is known in the public sphere for her fierce presence in punk music and independent media, but Meredith's life, if you know the secrets of Meredith Graves, her life has always been completely centered around her spirituality, her spiritual approach. And she may appear like a nymph who leaps from one career to another, appearing to be seemingly unbothered. But that's because the work she's doing physically in the world is not what she centers her being around. What she centers her being around is her engagement with life, the mystical undercurrent of everything she interacts with, and the divine that is able to be courted through all of her actions. And Meredith will probably blush to hear me say this, but I believe she is a true esoteric householder. Now, as a dedicated magician, she weaves together art, ritual, history, and the hidden currents of the mystical traditions that penetrate literally every aspect of our lives. Like, no joke, I am speaking as an American, and Western civilization is quite literally a magical working. Just look into the history of John Dee. Now, Meredith is the epitome of a one-line in human design. She is an encyclopedia of occult knowledge, and we always have a lot of fun talking to each other. And so this episode is actually part 2, because the first interview ended up getting published privately on my paid tier of my Patreon. That one is a little bit more biographical, if you want to hear more about Meredith's story. And this one is a bit more like two nerds just bouncing ideas off of each other for like 2 hours. So if you're into that, buckle up and let's dive right in. Hey, Meredith.
Hi.
Welcome back? Question mark.
Welcome back for round what are we going to call this, round 1.5?
Let's call it round 1.5.
Round 1.5. Software update. Software download.
Yes, exactly. Well, something that I've been saying to people recently at the beginning of this is just to ask them, like, what's like a recent win that you've experienced, like a small or big success?
It's a big, small success. And it's a small, big success. And I'm so excited that you asked me about this, Hanna, because I have actually been talking about this with people. In the last month, I have taught myself the very basic, very, very, very like bare bones, monkey see, monkey do skills necessary to begin learning 3 like trade crafts that are completely new to me. And while what those 3 things are is interesting, the win, per your original question, is the fact that historically that is not how I work. I have been a seamstress since I was 16. I've been knitting since I was 6. And I'll get the big question out of the way. I'm 37 years old. That's a long time, right? I've been doing music since I was born, and writing since I could. So I don't tend to jump in headlong to these new things. And I definitely don't self-educate. I'm really I have some block in my brain about respect for craft. And so when I want to learn something, I want an expert teacher. I want a guru, you know. I want a guide. I want to study it for a couple years. I want to attend a trade show. I want to watch other people do it. I want to make friends with, historically, I love to meet people who have skills that I admire and pray that I can do something nice for them, even if it's just bake the cake for their birthday party. I want to learn. I want to watch. I want to learn by watching. And then maybe I'll try it like 5 or 6 years later if I ever do. I'm like really mesmerized by that. Um, but I've become increasingly aware that there's a lot of people in the world, and sometimes those people are jerks who think they can do whatever and just never hesitate about anything and just go about their lives assuming that anyone who could maybe teach them something is dumber than they are. And they just swing for the bleachers. And I know there's plenty of people in between, like hesitant me and overconfident jerks. Um, but I said, you know what? What's stopping me? I can't hurt anyone or hurt anything by trying something alone in my apartment. So I have tried to shake up my praxis, as it were, and as a result, I have begun to teach myself traditional bookbinding. I bound my first book this month, which is a lot of fun. I also made a box that mimics a book. It's one of those fake like hiding lip boxes to hold my first piece of Victorian hair work.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so if you've ever seen in the Victorian era, which is such a bad way to measure time because it's a very long time, um, we'll talk of like long Regency, like post Jane Austen, up through maybe the turn of the century, let's say 1900, right? Um, Working with human hair as a material to make everything from memento mori pieces or mourning jewelry. Like somebody passes away, you take a lock of their hair, you weave it into patterns, or you preserve it in some way. That can just be a lock of hair put into a locket or into a, people will keep albums as well of their friends, their family members, like cut when you cut your hair, give me a lock of your hair. It can be something as simple as putting like a scrapbook together. But what I'm learning is hair work, which is using human hair to make, people make bracelets, people make earrings, people make sculptures, people make these huge elaborate wreaths out of hair from their whole family. And I don't have a lot of hair myself. I had to cut it a few years ago when I started to lose my hair after getting long COVID, unfortunately. But I had one braid from when my hair was really long. And I took it apart and I made a lover's knot and I put it in a locket. So I started to teach myself hair work. And again,
What? Sorry, I'm like shit right now.
it was really fun too. And you have really long hair. So if you just like keep your hair, when you see, I compulsively kind of like, because I'm so used to my hair falling out now, and I the loose strands of my hair, I kind of keep them in a jar. When you clean out your hairbrush, keep the hair, put a little mason jar, and then eventually like comb it out, get it organized. There are some really amazing women online who are like teaching, and there's a woman, I believe her name is actually Zen, ironically enough. She's at Hair Anthropology, I want to say. I'll clarify this if you want to put it in your show notes.
Oh, you're just like opening up my mind to.
Amazing.
Whenever somebody tells me about something I've never heard about before, I just like my like a hole opens up in my head of oh, I wonder, and I'm just like shook right now. I don't know why.
Well, I'm hopefully communicating that to you because these are things I've watched other people do for years. Like I say, like bookbinding. I have a friend on the internet. He is this amazing dude. He and his wife live out off the West Coast. His name is Nate McCall Bookbinding. And he has a Patreon now where if you're subbed at like a high tier, he gives you lessons. I have a little bound book that Nate McCall made me a few years ago. I've watched what he's done for like so many years on the internet. He is so incredible. And in the occult world, fine bookbinding and rare books and antiquarian books are such a big thing. I thought, it might be fun to learn how to do this too. So I watched some videos. I grabbed, I have the materials. I had to run out and get some chipboard, but I've got fabric. I could make book cloth. I've got thread. I've got old sketchbooks I can cut up to make paper signatures. So I said, if I can do it with stuff, if I don't have to spend a ton of money, if the only real investment for me is time, why not learn this? And then just last week, a new friend of mine, a wonderful painter who has a show in Vienna later this year, needed a prop made for a reference image for one of his paintings. And it was a piece of clothing. It was a headpiece. And knowing a tiny bit about millinery, but a good amount about ritual garments and fabrication, I ended up reteaching myself paper mache modeling so I could make a replica of this ancient Egyptian
Oh, that's so
headdress
fun.
things. So yeah, bookbinding, Victorian hair work, and paper mache modeling.
Wait,
And
okay,
Mil
I'm sorry. I'm like stuck on the fucking hair.
It's really crazy. It's
I'm
really
stuck on
fun.
the fucking hair. Wait, there's two things that I want to say. Have you ever heard of the book I Who Have Never Known Men?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's going through such a renaissance right now,
Yeah,
isn't it?
because it was published like a long time ago,
In
and
the
then I think
80s.
TikTok
Yeah.
like took it or something.
There was like a retranslation or a reissue.
That must be it.
It was the original novels in French, I think.
Mhm.
I think it came out in the 80s, which to me is like really interesting context. But yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
I
something
haven't
like
read it
early
yet.
90s. I just finished reading it like 2 days ago.
Do you like it?
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. I don't want to give any, it's like one of those books where you like don't want to say anything because you're gonna like give it away. But like for whoever's listening, it's like there's 40 women that live underground in a cage. They're held there against their will, but they don't know why they're there. It's like there was some sort of like world disaster and then their memory got wiped. So they remember their life before the cage, but they don't remember how they got there or why they're there. And so, anywho, I bring this up to say that they had no resources. Like they would get fed and they had like the bare minimum of clothing. And they would get cloth that they'd have to wrap their bodies with like robes, like they weren't allowed to sew, but they would use each other's hair to like sew or to repair things.
Yeah.
So anywho, when you're speaking about that, I was thinking about that.
Well, another thing that's funny in terms of like textile work happening, whether you want it to or not, another thing I've learned from some of these wonderful women who I follow who do this hair work is that hair has, because of how strong it is, has historically been a choice material to make fishing line. So you can use, if you have
For
very
real?
good hair, yeah, you can use it to make your own fishing line. And that's, that's fascinating to me because the primary material that I'm working in for my own art practice for the last few years has been wool. And what is the difference? Wool, hair, fur,
Oh.
they're all proteins. They're all from living creatures. They all shed naturally or
Wait, so could you
the
take
stretchability.
wrap lots of long pieces of hair together to make string? I don't get that.
Kind of. There's a weaving process, and this is not the kind of hair work that I've done, but it is the kind that I admire. So oftentimes this is done on what's called a hair work table, which isn't like a table like you sit at. It's like a short sort of they're hard to describe. They're like a tall cylinder with a hole in the middle and pegs around the edge, almost like a clock. And you'll use, a bunch of different clusters of hair, 4 or 5 strands each. And it's almost like bobbin lace, if you've ever seen bobbin lace being made. Another thing I studied a little bit last year, although I didn't get to do any hands-on work, with Elena Carnegie Laux, who's like the lace maker of all time. She's awesome. She's cool. She's fast. You're kind of you're weaving them over one another, almost like it's like the difference between a regular braid and a French braid. If you do it in the round, like you would knit a sleeve or the body of a sleeve, you end up with like a tube.
Oh.
And you can make them really small. And so that's how people make the bracelets and sort of like necklaces and these tubes of hair. And they become very light and very pliable. It's absolutely fascinating stuff.
There's something I think I'm having this reaction to this hair work thing where it's almost kind of like stinky cheese, where I'm like, there's something that's like kind of gross about it, but also like delectable.
That is where I live. I'm in that zone. Let me tell you, fetid cheese, sourdough starter that smells like absolute like sarcophagus off gas. Like this is like
You're like hair.
dirt, hair, compost, little old dogs from the garbage, books with bugs in them. Like that is exactly where I want to be.
It's where you live.
That's my happy place, is coming up with, finding newspapers that somebody left on the subway bench and taking them home, being like, well, they're just going to be paper mache. So yesterday's news, like whatever constitutes garbage.
Wait, is there also, okay, like in the history of hair work, I wasn't expecting us to suddenly start talking about hair. I love this. I'm not complaining. But is there anything in the history of it having kind of like an occult quality? Because you can like gather people's hair and like do things for them or against them. I don't know.
I would say you nailed it. So I don't know about well, the whole thing about the memento mori hair work is, and again, huge disclaimer. I am no expert. I am someone who I studied the Victorian era. Obviously, I am a studier, a student of the occult and esotericism. Hair work has fascinated me as a component of all of the above, but I'm very new to it, and I have just like read some period sources, basically. Um, I think it's primarily what I'll say for now, not having looked into that connection directly. I think reliquary, and memento mori and mourning jewelry are really fascinating because they do kind of carry an occult quality. And if you think about the supposed like loss of enchantment or the loss of religiosity in any case during the Victorian era, and especially in the Western world when we talk about, the late Victorian era, especially being a time when it was pretty non-religious, but you saw the emergence of groups like the AA, like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, like major esoteric orders emerged out of that time. People will call that, the search for meaning in a less religious world or whatever. Well, it was also, spiritualism. This was the peak of seances. This was the widespread mass-produced Ouija boards and tarot cards pre-pictorial key to the tarot. This is the first time that kind of technology was widely available. And so you have this long romantic century during which time mourning culture became this huge thing. And so I see it all as being in line. We have artifacts of our dead that we would carry with us, or artifacts of the living, lovers giving each other locks of their hair. Also, that's like a huge part of it too. So we have love tokens, we have, almost talismans. They're things you in a lot of cases. There's stuff that you wear. So we have memories trapped, and there is a lot to say about hair in spiritual practice. People, who cut their hair before a war, or who cut their hair after going through.
Well, yeah, and there's also other country, because we're talking about Victorian era as in like Western culture, and then there's like other cultures where it's like you shouldn't like people don't let you touch their hair, yeah, because hair like holds like energy in it. I don't, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And up to and including contemporary American evangelical Pentecostalism, where
totally
growth, I am from that part of the country where most of my classmates could sit on their hair. And my hair has, until the last few years when I grew it out in the early stages of the pandemic, my hair has never been longer than my chin. I've always kept it short. And, growing up in upstate New York, you don't know anything except the life you have. I didn't realize how much that branded me as a heretic. Heretic. Most of my class would be in the long denim skirts. Their parents wouldn't let them watch Sailor Moon or Pokemon. And then there's me, and I'm new, and it's hi everybody. Why is everyone looking at me like I'm so different? I'm 11. It's because I have a bob. And like I didn't know about that. So yeah, hair, spirituality, all sorts of stuff. I shaved my head for most of my 20s because I was very, very ascetic. Very ascetic.
Yeah.
Now I'm because it actually, you actually, as it turns out, nobody could have told me back then, it's a lot less work.
Oh, to have short hair? Or to have long hair?
To have longer hair, it's a lot less work. So much less work. I thought I was like winning the spiritual game by buzzing my hair off for like a decade. No, that takes a lot of work. A lot of work to be looked at that way all the time, and to have
I get you. Oh, I get you.
Cut it every week too. Like it's actually like it's a lot of physical.
You can blend more into the background. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, that too. But also just physically, like when I realized I could just put my hair in a bun every day.
Oh, that's real.
Or oh my God, it's awesome.
That's real.
Anyway.
Wow. Okay. So this hair thing is gonna burrow into my brain and
I'm gonna
hold me hostage for the next like 2 weeks as I think about this, but
it's really cool. You would have a lot of fun doing it. There's so many cool examples.
Well, no, I'm just like my constellation brain is just like, okay, well, like I'm just like thinking about hair right now, and I'm like, well, there's like other cultures where like, or religions where you can't even look at a woman's hair.
Yeah, totally.
Which is fine. People can do whatever they want. And then like in India, hair is seen as like disgusting, and so like lower caste people are hairdressers because like loose hair is like very disgusting. And so I'm just like thinking about like all these different cultures and all these different perceptions of hair, this thing that we all have.
Interesting, because my observations in the my loose observations made over many years of like the field of Ayurveda, for instance, there's all sorts of, very profound treatments that people will do to get their hair to be stronger.
No, it's not that people don't appreciate their hair. It's like if there's hair like on the ground, it's like loose hair. It's like hair that's fallen out. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm very intrigued by that. Yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm constellating a lot of
Yeah, I know. Okay, whoa, we're in the hair universe.
We're in the
But
hair.
this is all the fact that we even went here is so Meredith. So I
That's
don't know why.
my human design.
No. So like I don't know why I expected anything else to happen. And it's great. Um but okay, so your win was actually teaching yourself things as opposed to being an adoring student of an expert. Is that what I heard you say?
Hesitating. It's really what it is like, because I'm always happy to self-educate. I never expect anyone to teach me. I seek it out
Mhm.
in a professional capacity, but I prefer to have examples to, show me the dance and then I'll follow your steps. Is kind of how I tend to operate. But in this case, I jumped in and I learned by doing. I shook up my general mode of how I learn things. And
I
it's
love
very
it.
very strange and refreshing. You're never too old to learn new things. They say it.
Totally.
Turns out it's true. So
Totally. I learned new things just now.
hell
So
yeah.
all about it.
There we go.
All about it. Well, so for anyone listening, who doesn't know you, let's do the thing where you kind of just like describe yourself spiritually, like your practice or the things you focus on, or the title if we even want to have a title. It's a hard
Yeah.
question for some, but how would you answer that?
Yeah, I don't I give a lot of answers to that because I don't know. I think one consistent experience I've had over the majority course of my life is explaining to people what I do or well, I used to do this and then I did this and then I did this and then I did this and people go, "Wow, you had a lot of lives." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I kind of do." But how I explain because of that, how I explain myself, I kind of have, I have different bios written up for different things accepted to, or if I publish an article, I want to have, here's my like music credentials, here's writerly credentials, here's my esoteric credentials, here's my artistic credentials. They're all very different, so overlapping them. Um, well, what would I say? My name is Meredith, and I am a student of the esoteric arts going back, how old am I? At least 25 years now, with serious intention. Like I was a very young teenager when I first realized that the things that came kind of naturally or naturally intrigued me as a young child were something people did on purpose. And in that very moment, I said, well, that's it for the rest of my life. That's what I'm going to do. Cool. Because it was apparent to me that I could also do everything else within those parameters. So I'm a career spiritual enthusiast who I'm a maker, I'm a researcher, I'm a writer, I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I live in New York City. And for almost 3 decades now, the overwhelming majority of my work, even stuff that doesn't look like it, has been focused around uh the quest for knowledge, the spiritual meaning thing. I have for about the last decade focused the bulk of my work, my research work around the Western esoteric tradition. For the last half decade, I've focused in the 19th and 20th centuries,
Mm.
more modern Western spiritual traditions. But
Mm.
uh, that, there's a lot of variety there.
Mm.
Um,
Wait, so for somebody who's listening, I totally get you when you say Western esoteric tradition, but like for somebody who maybe doesn't fully get what you mean by that, like how else would you describe that?
how else would I describe it? Vaguely, because it's a very vague thing. And calling it,
Totally.
it's a problematic term. Calling it the Western esoteric tradition doesn't immediately clue people into the big thing about it, which is that
Totally.
it's the synthesis of global and historical mystery and esoteric traditions and the fringes of Abrahamic religions and cultural practices
Totally.
all over the world throughout all of time and history. And it interpolates mythology, it interpolates ritual practice, religious practice, and pretty much everything else.
Mhm.
Where my focus lies is, at least for the last few years, I've been really interested in the people who made it what it is today. So just as an example, starting about, well, at the beginning of the pandemic, I became really more invested in the lives of the women who were members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. 90s in England, and I began to study deeper into their lives, especially that of Florence Farr, who was the head of the Golden Dawn for a couple of years, as well as a major actress on the British and Irish stages, the muse of W.B. Yeats and George Bernard Shaw, and a ferociously cool performer, songwriter, and adventurer in her own right. So I became really interested in how Florence's life shaped our understanding of Golden Dawn magic, which is still one of the primary ceremonial magical traditions upheld in the West to this day. So yeah, I'm focused on um, everything outside of the text, I think is kind of a nice way to put it these days. Like I want to I know what's on the paper. We all know what's on the paper. Magicians around the world are still practicing what's on the paper and trying to figure out, you know, how it's done, how they can make sure that they're understanding what's on the paper enough to get the results that they want. And for the last decade, I've been really deep in this hypothesis that I have had ever since it hit me. It hit me and I thought about it for a long time, per how this conversation started. I thought about it for a long time and I sought out teachers and I kind of stayed in my books and I read and I read and I read. And then the last half decade, I went, okay, it's time. I can put this to the test now. My theory being, in order to really get the results that we want, we can look to the period in which these books were written, published, and popularized in order to really understand the impact these modes of magic can have. We might want to really have a deep understanding of the time in which they were popularized, right? So for me, the Golden Dawn system of magic was something I was pretty intimately familiar with up to that point, and I didn't realize how much I really didn't know until I looked into Florence Farr, her everyday life, and I started to, as the primary example.
Wait, and she was the woman who was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn?
Yeah, there were a lot of women. So the Hermetic Order.
Oh, there were multiple women. Okay.
Yeah, there were multiple women. One of them was Maud Gonne, the grandmother of the IRA. You know, the revolutionary women were members of the Golden Dawn. Moina Mathers, Pixie Smith, who was the creator of the Rider-Waite Tarot, the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. But Florence Farr was particularly interesting because of her background in theater and writing and her relationship to men whose writing we still regard really highly today. So in order, of course, I passively understood what it meant to have a lodge that ran counter to Freemasonry, which wasn't letting women in. Here's this heavily Masonically influenced order with lots of women involved in it, right? And I'm thinking, well, that's cool. That's what I'm, going to study. My work as a textile artist and my work as a clothing researcher immediately just T-boned that, right? Because if we think about magic as a potential liberator, right? And like in the 1890s, this Victorian era that we all see is so stuffy, there's these women doing magic in the magical order. And then right after that, we get, Crowley and we start to think about, sex magic and all this crazy stuff. How do we know? So one of the ways I found to really further embed myself in my understanding of that corner of the ceremonial magical tradition was I started to recreate clothing from that period, from 1893, 1894, the years when Florence Farr was at the head of the Golden Dawn. Thinking about her life in particular was a fascinating inroad because as a professional actress, which was a previously heavily stigmatized profession, it was basically a synonym for prostitute, which is extremely unfortunate. She was doing esoteric theater on the British national stage, and she was regarded as a woman of status and held in really high esteem. Women of her class would have been, the 1890s, if the listeners aren't super familiar with how women dressed back then, it is ludicrous. Look up clothing. The sleeves were so massive.
I can picture it in my head.
Right before the Gibson girl, the corsets that gave you a sway, pushed it forward. Bust improvers, huge, elaborate bodices, walking suits, hair in a hat every time you went outside. So imagining Florence Farr going from her everyday life as a woman in the 1890s to the stage of the British National Theatre, where she premiered as the lead character in George Bernard Shaw's Arms and the Man, where she's playing a Romanian peasant, I think, where there's one photo of her from that production in a Romanian peasant dress, then getting redressed in the corset and the chemise and the bloomers and the stockings and the bust improver and the jacket and this and that, and like 57 layers of clothing, only to then go to a meeting of the Golden Dawn and once in this inner sanctum, strip down to a towel robe to do magic. as soon as that clicked for me, I was like, I need to know what it physically, how there's a piece missing from people who study the ceremonial magic if they're not doing the physical embodied choreography of it. You can learn the hand gestures, you can learn the banishing rituals, you can learn the bornless rite, you can learn the watchtowers, you can do, you can go out with a compass and set everything up. But will you really experience what it was like to be there unless you also went through this trial of coming in wearing 19 layers of clothing, and what it would do to your magic if you had to physically take that identity off in order to then go into this other mode. So that really fascinated me. And that was like, I put about 4.5, 5 years into that. And that's a project I'm going to go back to at some point. But then last year, 2024.
Well, can I pause you for a sec? This is why we need women researching shit, because I don't think a man would ever fucking think about that. Sorry for any men that are listening, but you guys.
Well, you're categorically absolutely correct. And this this is like my main, if there's one thing that encompasses kind of all the work that I've been doing for the last decade or so, I think it really is this. It's this idea that like domestic history, textile history, these things, they weren't taken seriously. And so we've lost so much. Only in the last century have we begun to consider, cookbooks as a primary first-hand written source of women's lives. They weren't taken seriously. They weren't copied over. They weren't made available. Similarly, clothing, textiles, we're just starting to see quilting being something that people take seriously. But these are vibrant, rich histories, and they interlace with magic, like at so many crucial points. So for people who, I used to talk about this on another friend's podcast a few years ago, for people who would ask me like, oh, I'm interested in magic, but where do I start? I would always say, do not go to the library or the bookstore and look for the metaphysical or new age section. And, don't look for magic for beginners or whatever you have there, right? Like, it can be really complicated and really confusing. The number one advice that I used to give to people was to pick what you're already into. Something you're already into. Do you play an instrument? Do you like to cook? Are you passionate about history? Do you like fantasy novels with dragons? Like quilting, literally anything. Do you play sports? And find where magic intersects with that, because there is discipline on the earth that doesn't have some sort of paranormal idea behind, or superstition behind it, or religious inclination, or just you'll read about the history of anything that interests you, and really quickly magic will start to bubble up.
That's so real. That's so real. I'm so glad
you say that. Yeah, you'll already have a hook in. So for me, thankfully, I feel super lucky, because by pure luck, magic was the thing that got me interested in magic. Like, I found, like a lot of people my age and of my generation, early internet access plus the boom of like Wicca books in the late 90s. It was really easy for me to, have Silver Ravenwolf, to have Paul Huzon, to have, John Michael Greer, to have like all these things like at the library are available, even in a small town, even in like the backwoods where I grew up. But yeah, if you want to get into magic but you're not sure where to start where you are in terms of what you already love. So finding ways to like,
even if you love food, I mean, like cooking.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Absolutely.
Oh my god. We all love food, I think.
You know what I learned last night, and I could not believe this. Do you know how old this is? Vulgar. It's not that vulgar. It's not vulgar to me. It's not going to be vulgar to you and most of the people listening. But if you're squeamish, people figure this out every few years, and it gets that old chestnut about the love spell of women like putting, or people, of course, but usually in the cultural stereotype, it's women do this, right?
So totally.
Putting menstrual blood in food.
Oh yeah.
That whole thing about like, don't let women make spaghetti for you. It's a meme. You'll see it. Do you know the first documented, like written down example of that is in the 11th century? 11th century is the first time it's written down, which obviously means if it's got to be
written down in one context, like as this is something you should do, or this is people criticizing women for doing it.
Keep criticizing women for doing it.
Oh shit. So they've been doing it longer, probably.
Oh, absolutely. The second something becomes a law, something only becomes a law if people have been doing it long enough that it's annoyed other people, right?
That's so
And
good.
so this is also, I'd heard a little bit about it's the same book, and of course I could go grab the book where I learned this. But it's all the way on the other side of the room. This is the same book, and I had heard about this from an episode of Betwixt the Sheets. I wish I could remember which one, but I listened to every episode, so I can't recall. Um, you know, much like later on, a few centuries later, the church would be the ones writing and propagating these demonology manuals, like, uh King James and the Malleus Maleficarum, right? Basically just making it up, but which it's all apocrypha. But that gave people, people read that manual of here's what you should definitely never do because you'll be persecuted, you'll be cursed. A lot of people read that and go, I should never do this, huh?
Oh, it's like Dare. It's like, oh, drugs actually sound pretty cool.
Like, oh man, you mean if I don't do drugs, I can be a cop like you? Like, that's kind of how I feel when I read these medieval and early modern texts, right? Well, early on, of course, there were a lot of, based on who was allowed to read and write and how focused that those skills were within the clergy. That was pretty much the only people who could. You see this history of books being written by religious leaders that are like, and by the way, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And in this 11th century book, I had heard about this part of women should not be putting fish in their vaginas. It was believed. And this is one of those, like, where'd you get that idea, bro? Because I'm pretty sure no one on the planet would ever have done this. I think this guy came up with this idea that women would insert a fish they were later going to serve to men into their vagina, and that would somehow. So it was, please, this man was saying, please, women, stop putting fish into your vaginas and putting your blood into food. 11th century. We're still making memes about this today.
Wait, no. It's literally the 2025 version of that. Is like when you go past like an Applebee's or something, and there's a sign on the door that says, "Please do not come in here dressed as a minion." And you're like, okay, well, who came in there dressed as a minion?
Somebody had to do that in order for you to make a law against it. Yeah, it's incredible. It's like once in a while a list will circulate of like, can you believe here's the weirdest law in the books in every state. In Delaware, you can't turn counterclockwise while eating ice cream on your front lawn on Sundays. It's like, they want to know who did that. I want to know why you had to make a rule. That's like,
Okay, oh my God. Also,
so that was my answer to your question about who I am spiritually.
wait, I'm gonna say this because I wonder if there's like a pipeline here, a hiding, because you just unlocked a core memory. I remember I must have been in like elementary, maybe middle school. It was probably middle school. And I don't know where I got this book, but I had one of those like spell books that are like for kids, or like they're like a young, I don't know. I can't even picture it. But I remember it must have been middle school because I was definitely more boy crazy. And there was one thing where it like said like dip your tampon in like some guy's coffee, or
Yeah.
like dip your and I remember like I think that like every lovesick girl pipeline to being a witch when they're older genuinely thinks about trying that.
I I cannot say, but then again, I am someone who once very, very publicly put my own blood into my Vans 12-inch record, which was filmed, and a photo of which was run in the NME at the time, and which completely horrified people. And it has only been a few people, at the time it was like a big thing. I just wanted to know that it could be done. I thought it was very cool. Although in the decade plus since that band existed and since that record came out, only a few people have ever looked at me and been like, blood magic, huh? And I'm like, damn, I think most few people would like get that.
I go, oh, so they saw what you were doing.
Jar of blood in the record pressing plant. Because I was there. I was standing on top of the.
Oh, that's crazy. That's what you mean.
Yeah, I physically put my own blood into a limited press of my band's record. So
that's what you mean. Now I'm picturing that. Yeah.
I didn't need a man. I needed a record deal, baby. No. It's just.
Oh, that's so funny.
It's just for fun. But yeah, the idea, blood. One of the four humors, one that carries, blood is I should be more up on my humoral theory. That's one of those things you can have a company, such great company. Blood is heat. It's energetic. It moves life. And if you want to get your life entangled with someone else, if you want to, get there.
Yeah, wait, I'm thinking about what we were talking about earlier about cheese and hair and all
Would,
these
yep.
substances that are so taboo.
Yep, yep. Witchcraft has,
Yeah.
this is why, well, to spin it back around, I told you I would tell you my big news
Oh
about
yeah.
this summer.
Yeah.
And oh, this is actually a great, I'm like, now let me take over your podcast.
No, go
I
for
have really, I put it so far. I don't like to put my business on the internet. And people who know me, they know this, but it all changes when I have something to be excited about that involves other people and I want to like get the word out and support them. So for me, I've already announced this. I put it on my Instagram story once. Um, for the second year in a row, I will be speaking at the Salem Witchcraft and Folklore Conference in August, and I am so jazzed. I had such a wonderful time last year, and frankly, I'm also incredibly surprised I was invited back after last year when I spent 2 hours talking about violent, terrifying crimes. Because
Yes.
last year, my presentation last year was on the history of illegal bodies and witch bodies, and I talked about the lack of a cultural understanding in the courts and the judicial systems worldwide and how we got to where we are now and how create because there's been like a recent like smear of esoteric crimes and I was like fixate to wit this year my talk is on the character stereotype archetype cultural figure of the good witch, our idea of good witches and how that uh, cultural icon has developed over thousands of years, ranging from, ancient myth up through fairy tales, like what makes a good witch? What does the good witch do? Who is she? What does she do? What makes her different, not from the wicked witch, but just from the witch? Because for how long our really explicit cultural understanding is that a witch is like a really questionable figure. You don't really need to add wicked in front of it, but a good witch is something different. Um, what makes the good witch who she is? And
Oh,
why
damn.
we have this good witch, whether it's Glinda in The Wizard of Oz, or the astrologers in Ronald Reagan's White House, or the
Oh.
impact people like Julius Evola.
Wait, can I share a thought that's coming up for me?
Of course.
Wait, because you're talking about the Good Witch, and then I was on a bit of an L. Frank Baum, who wrote The Wizard of Oz, kick last year, and Oz is like a surveillance state.
That it's literally the title of my presentation is The Good Witch, A Tale of
Yeah,
Love.
so she's a
Surveillance
good
state.
witch because she's working for the surveillance state.
And that's what we're going to talk about everything from myth, fairy tale, and archetype up through psychical research done on behalf of Western governments in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, psychic terrorism, where we're going to talk about the love
I'm
of
gonna come and I'm gonna be dressed up as the Good Witch.
well then we'll be twins because of course just like last year I'm gonna have to make a dress. I'm gonna make a special dress for my big special day. But yeah, that's my whole point that I'm really driving at is that we don't have like what makes the good witch who she is her desire to try to transcend otherness, which is the one thing she'll never accomplish. The good witch is perpetually vulnerable because good or not, she's still a witch first and foremost, and that makes her perpetually othered. She's always going to be in danger.
Oh, that's so real.
This is John Dee. This is Rasputin. This is,
Oh, that's so real.
we're going to go through plenty of examples from fiction, from media, from real life. And this hyper fixation on this good witch character, right? But why, it's a top-down cultural thing where we hear menstrual blood, insects, eye of newt, tongue of frog, babies fat, stealing men's penises and running off into the ether with them, right? The witch has always been understood to be this terrifying, bad, scary figure, but like, really?
Well, also another thought that's coming up for me, this is probably something that you've already thought about, but just for anyone who's listening, is like uh the emphasis on the witch being so bad and the emphasis on the witch being so demonized is almost like a ploy to convince the average person to not believe that there's witches in the government, there's witches doing everything, like they're there. So when we think like, oh, they're so bad, it's like, well, witches would only do bad things. They're not working in the government.
It's a centuries-long PR campaign, and it's
exactly
a little juvenile. It's a little juvenile for me to beat this old dead horse, but at the same time, the same people who we're seeing a really strong example of it right now in the current like three-ring circus of the current, American political administration. You have charismatic evangelicals that are less holy water, and they're doing all sorts of like rituals to get their point, like a lot of these people come from charismatic backgrounds where they're speaking in tongues, they're doing glossolalia, they're channeling, they're and this is a lot of what I talked about in Salem last year. I talked about, just as one example, because I had 90 slides in 2 hours. I'm really obsessed with this topic. I talked about the recent spate of Mormon crimes, which is really important to me. Mormon, it's an esoteric branch of Christianity. Mormonism is a channeled religion.
Absolutely.
Channeled religion, brought to life by a treasure hunting magician who
No, literally.
fried golden plates using angelic language through a hole in his hat and died with a Jupiter talisman in his pocket. Why are all these Mormons doing all this magic and scrying, and why is it leading them to kill their families? Is the thing that I was like really looking into. Their profit-based. I had a whole slide of examples from like the first couple books written by Joseph Smith of like Joseph Smith gave instructions in his books of like, here's how you tell if someone you meet is imbued with a bad spirit. Here's how you can like test it, right? So I'm really into this because, of course, what you're describing is bang on, bang on. It's a centuries-long PR campaign.
100%.
The same people who think witches can only do bad things are the people who watch an accredited member of the clergy transmute the body and blood of Christ every Sunday, which is wonderful and which is magic. And there's historical precedent for that going back to, the separation of the Platonic schools by the Emperor Justinian and the sequestering of knowledge and literacy and the academy into religious sects, into monasteries, into convents. This is a tale told. So that's what we're going to look at. The idea of the good witch as an auxiliary arm of the state.
Shut the fuck up, Meredith. You're speaking to my soul.
Oh, this is what I'm doing this year. So I'm about to spend the next 7 months just researching this heinous character. And we're going to go into this, and this may be of particular interest to you, because I know you deal in this compost pile too. New Age spirituality, the threefold law, and love and light, and bastardization of all these like good vibes only kind of culture. Good vibes only to me is an arm of the state. That's not real. That's not real. So we're gonna talk about that.
Oh my god, that's so real.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I think it's gonna be really fun. So that was all. I really just wanted to I'm really excited about it because the people who put Salem together, Matt and Jackie and everyone, they work so hard, and they were so kind to me last year. I really felt like I've told people about this. I was more scared to go to Salem and give this talk than I used to be to get on TV for 2 to 20 million people live every day. If anyone listening isn't aware, I'm a former broadcast journalist. I was the host of TV news for 2 years. I'm a journalist as well, which is why I love research. And I was never this scared to go on television, ever, right? Except the one time I interviewed Enya. That was a deep cut. I was fucked up. I lost my mind. I yelled. It was so scary. Enya never leaves her castle, let alone comes to the United States. I was castle out of my mind afraid. Out of my mind. I was just like, oh, thank you in 6 languages. But I was terrified because the people who go to Salem are working service magicians. They're scholars. They're people who publish books. They're going in to talk about what they do. And God bless my friends and my community and my loved ones. My entire reputation in the occultural world is based on my personal reputation, one-on-one, just knowing people.
Yeah.
I've never published a book on this topic.
Yeah.
I have never been a magician for hire. I've taught tarot for years, only when I want, intermittently, usually for free. I teach one workshop. It's about how the learning the history of the tarot can lead you to be a more efficient tarot reader. I've taught it in corporate settings a couple of times, which is cool. And then for years, I ran the program. I worked for a tech company for many years where I conceived of, launched, and maintained a program specifically helping esoteric and occultural artists fundraise that raise millions and millions and millions of dollars for tons of wonderful people around the world. 100% of my credentials in this world, though, come from those relationships that I have with people. Nobody can read my book and say, oh, Meredith knows what she's talking about. That's not a thing. So the fact that Salem took a chance on me.
Oh my god,
especially the material was just so absurd. I went in with a full, here's the taxonomy I developed, putting index cards on my wall here in my studio. Here's my crazy wall of stuff connected by red string for how I'm going to explain how we got a Supreme Court. It's called witchcraft, baby. And they let me do it in my little princess dress. So the fact that they're letting me come back for another year to talk about another weird niche parapolitical topic, I couldn't be more grateful because it gives me the chance also to spend the week studying with some of the smartest people in Witch World, and to be
Yeah, well, wait, is there like a speck of like imposter syndrome that you feel like? Because like, oh, I don't have any books published, or I've never like been a professional witch in so many ways. I don't know.
maybe just because, I like, so imposter syndrome, powerful word. Imposter syndrome is a term that has been steered so far away from its original meaning.
Aha.
So
Oh,
like now,
totally.
when we say imposter syndrome now, I feel like, and please curb me. I'm so sorry. My little old lady dog is snoring so loud. I don't know if you're picking
I
it.
can't hear it. I wish I could hear it. That sounds
One of
cute.
her many nicknames is Honks the Clown, and
He's honking.
she's being Honks the she's a it's like really aggressively loud. I'm really
Do
sorry.
you need to move her body?
No.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
She's very happy. If I hear her
Like,
little,
this is my life.
she only weighs 4.5 pounds. She might roll off the couch. I've seen her do it a couple times. She's very bouncy. She's rubbery for an old lady. She just hits and keeps going. She's really chaotic.
Anyway,
Sorry.
imposter syndrome
The
is
original
far
name,
away.
imposter syndrome. Yeah, I feel like when we use that term today, people will say, I have imposter syndrome. And really what they mean is, I don't feel qualified to be where I am.
Yeah.
Right? So I
Uh-huh.
hear
Yeah.
use the term imposter syndrome, and they mean, I got a job and now I have imposter syndrome because I don't feel like I fit in this company. Or I went to a party and I feel imposter syndrome because I don't feel like I fit in with all these new people around me.
Oh, that's the way that I was thinking about it.
Yeah, so the original,
Ah.
as far as I understand it, the original meaning of imposter syndrome actually has to do with expertise in a really, really specific way. Still, imposter syndrome at its origin refers to that learning curve where the more time you spend in a discipline, the more years and hours that you put in, the more you realize you don't know and will never know. You actually start to feel dumber the longer you work in one discipline. That's what imposter syndrome originally means. And I think that's a really crucial distinction. And I understand that, like, that's how language works. Words change. It now means something
That
different.
almost sounds like the beginning of the spiritual path for like a researcher.
It really puts you going, it puts you on a
Crazy.
somewhere. That's for sure. And so, do I feel imposter syndrome? I think one of the two, certainly.
Totally. There's a speck of each, we could say.
There's a speck of each. And so, I've been in this world since I was 11 years old. I'm 37. I'm turning 30 this year, and that's how long I've been doing it consistently, albeit to varying degrees of intensity. But for the last 10, 12 years, it's been the focus of my everyday life, for sure, for sure.
Well, your one line in human design is what brought you there. And you were seen and recognized for that.
I gotta learn more about it because human design is so fascinating. And every time that you tell me something about this, I end up just immediately being like, yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. What is it? What did you, the investigator, right?
The investigator.
Investigator. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, and also another thing about the investigator is that the investigator sometimes won't speak on something until they feel like they've explored every aspect of it. So they're the sort of person that isn't really good at responding to like immediate things that are happening like in the media or like politically because they just like need a second to be like, wait, I can't say anything about this because I need to like read 3 books about what led us here. Does that check out?
at the same time that I literally used to do daily news. And
So interesting.
I had to, and I think this is interesting because, no one is any one thing. So that is me. That is me generally wanting to obsessively research and read a ton of sources and listen to lectures and go to classes and have all of this. Over the years, I've honed my ability to create fast, meaningful commentary based on what I understand to be the limits of that function.
Yeah, well, okay, so you're okay, we're not like looking at your chart, but you're the 1-3.
1-3. Which aren't
So
you as well?
no, I'm a 2-4.
I'm
The 3 line is the fuck around and find out line.
right, the martyr, right?
Yeah, the martyr. And so you martyr yourself for the sake of everybody else. You're like, I make all of these quote unquote mistakes so that you guys don't have to.
I love that. I love that. That to me is like, that's what I want to be. I'm happy to take that L. I'm very much like
Mhm.
if there's a couple of cores to my spiritual practice, and I think exactly that kind of, because people think fuck around and find out in kind of a jester's privilege sort of way.
Totally.
I'll have fun and I'll see what happens. I'm much more of a I'll take the L. What do I have to lose? Like
Mm.
I'm for all intents and purposes, if I stand in the right light and I kind of keep my hands in
Mm.
my pockets, I'm a well-meaning middle-aged white lady to the outside world. If someone needs to be, this is why I got sober a decade ago, is because I realized like, oh, if I have the privilege when so many of my loved ones don't to not have, substances in my life, then I can be an intercessor. Someone in every situation, the world is a dangerous place, and someone should be able to step in, divert, distract,
Lucidly.
lucid, figure out what's going on. And it has served me really, 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 really well over the years. I live in New York City. Stuff happens. And if we really don't want to call the cops, we really better be prepared, not just prepared and informed and equipped to step in, whether it's moderate, like minor street medic skills, basic language and translation, the ability to connect people, tech knowledge, um, knowing your basic legal rights, which is becoming more important than ever in a protest situation, but also just riding the subway. Uh, One like easy example, I saw a woman get hit by a car once, an old woman at night standing on the corner, and Uber pulled her around. The Uber driver, his passengers, and the woman spoke three different languages.
Oh God.
And I happened to be walking down the street with my dog when it happened, and it's like it feels like a fever dream now, but just stepping in and saying, "You don't drive away, you stay here," making sure the woman was older, like the grandma, and just kind of when four people were just standing there frozen in a panic, I felt totally okay going, "Here's what we're gonna do," and I just because I saw it all happen, I said, "Okay, I'm a witness. You do this, you do this, you go here, you sit here. Nobody do anything." So that's one that stands out in my head as like a intervention. You know, it's important to me, and needing to sacrifice doesn't even feel like the right word. Needing to just like not drink in order to make sure if I'm out at night in the world, I want to be clear headed. I want to have a choice, and I want to be available. Um,
You know what
yeah,
I've been thinking about a lot since our last conversation, which is secretly on my Patreon for anyone who's listening to this for reasons that we don't need to disclose. There's nothing horrible.
yeah, no, there's nothing horrible. It's funny, but I won't disclose it. So people will sign up for Patreon to find out.
They're gonna be disappointed because it's like not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's probably if you pay money to hear me sounding slightly more erudite than I do today, I was like probably wouldn't get together. But anyway,
Well, what I was thinking about was we were talking about last time we were talking about how like you kind of feel like it's almost this I'm gonna do this for you guys so that you don't have to energy of like I'm gonna do all of this research about like serial killers and stuff that is like for all intents and purposes terrible sense impressions
oh yeah, oh
so that people don't have to. And you were kind of like saying something like, we kind of need someone to take the fall or something. And so I've been actually thinking about that a lot since he said it because I've also been thinking about like neutrality and like I think I'm just wired in this way towards neutrality where I'm able to kind of see things from a lot of different perspectives and I'm like the enemy of somebody who's a very black and white thinker because I just I'm wired more towards like neutrality and seeing the in between. And I was thinking about how like it's like my way of being, not everybody needs to be the neutral party, but we need a neutral party. Do you see what I mean? It's like I'm not saying that like my way is the best way, but it's like in this world it's good to have a mediator. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I do not see myself as neutral. That's like really, really particular. I do not see myself as neutral.
Oh yeah,
For
I
that,
wasn't speaking about you. I was speaking about me.
oh no, I know. I'm just saying.
Totally.
Yeah, contra that, I don't see myself or what I can provide to the world as being exemplary of any neutrality that I personally hold. But that's also because I tend to, and you might drive with this, you might not. I don't tend to see myself as any fixed thing. I have worked for years to hone a position of observational neutrality to make sure that I have all the facts
Mm-hmm.
on a situation. And
Mm-hmm.
And it's both, it's intellectual neutrality, it's philosophical neutrality at first. It's also a somatic neutrality. So actively, a huge part of my background, my practice, my lived experience is distress tolerance. I know we talked about this last time, but I have subjected myself to hundreds of hours of pain on purpose because to me, that's an important skill. I need to be able to not flinch when a loud noise happens near me. I don't want to be, and again, this is a privileged position to take. It's also one that I've worked my ass off for in a lot of contexts, right? I have fought my fragile nervous system every step of the way so I don't have a panicked reaction when something panic-worthy happens. I can be a better intercessor thus. I can be a better citizen. I can be, someone has to remain level-headed in the eye of the storm. So it is a thing that it goes against my very nature as someone who was consistently my entire life told I was too emotional, I was too much, I was too this, I was too that. I cried at the drop of a hat. I was easily bullied. I was way fried nerves constantly. This was my life until I was, I'm not fully over it yet. I'm just working at it much more purposefully now.
Totally.
What that does is it allows me to feel I'm more resilient when I come into contact with things that are extremely unpleasant, right? And so for many, many people, they don't have a choice to avoid or not avoid some really horrible, horrible things, right? People with my lived experience, I may only come into contact with, let's say, white supremacy in the context of I'm a white person. People should not feel comfortable just swinging for the bleachers and telling me shit, but you overhear crazy shit all the time, and you're a lot more likely to hear it if people think there's a chance you're on their side, right? Therefore, while I am explicitly, transparently, and historically obviously not okay with white supremacy, I will put myself in the path of that material. I've spent the last decade studying white supremacist and Nazi, fascist, satanic, anti-cosmic recruiting on the internet because I want to know it when I see it. I want to, if I'm of the right type to potentially be in the presence of those dog whistles, I want to be able to ID them. I want to know what symbol on your jacket tells me you're some Odinist whack job.
Oh, totally. And how are those symbols evolving as they have to go further underground, or they're coming forward in some ways? Totally.
Exactly. Who's out there recruiting? What is in this literature that has become, it's gone from, fringe, barely existing individual people sprinkled throughout the UK in the 1980s, leading up to huge cross sections of the American military, or ways that incels are being cajoled into violence on internet forums because at the same time they're being fed a bunch of manosphere content. They're also being introduced on the same boards to these fringe sectarian, anti-cosmic, antinatalist, satanic, Nazi-influenced, handbooks of magic. It's all one thing. And so if I can hone my ability to tolerate unpleasant feelings, distress, shit that I hate, to put it in short, I hate this shit so much. I hate it enough that I can't go deaf to it. I can't go deaf to it. It's my responsibility to not go deaf to it. I want to know. So if someone who's more likely to get close-up contact with that kind of stuff doesn't want to carry that weight in addition to all the other weight they might be carrying,
That's the room.
I'm here to be a resource. I also, obviously, from this kind of research work I've been doing for the last couple of years, I also refuse to assimilate as an esotericist, as a witch, as whatever you want to call me or whatever I want to call myself. I came of age during the Great Assimilation, right? In the 90s is when people in the army were fighting, if I die in Operation Desert Storm, I want a Wiccan funeral. And in my mind, it's why do we have a military? That's that should be happening. But okay. Getting people to think Wicca, it's harmless, it's this, it's that. That assimilationist tack, that doesn't really work for me. I want to represent our history correctly. I want to be able to talk about the broad stroke that magic has painted across the world. And we cannot pretend. We're putting people in danger when we pretend the dark side of it doesn't exist. And I know that for some people, talking about the dark side of magic is the Kikaffer manual. We're talking there's a darkness in rereading necromantic manuals of the 15th century. And I think that's awesome. And I don't want to deny that. I don't want to downplay the history of the skull, the cult of the skull or whatever. I don't want to deny the presence of, the black cube, whatever it is that people might want to talk about. But there are ultra contemporary, very dangerous things happening. And I think that we can't leave those out when we talk about the dangers of occultism. So it's important to me that I can be versed enough in those things. That's of great historical importance to me.
Oh, totally. Oh my God. Yeah, I think when I was speaking for myself about the neutrality piece, for me, it's actually like a very complex experience where I have my own very strong opinions about things. But I feel like having the ability to like neutrally try to see where somebody else is coming from, even if I don't agree with them, is something that comes like really naturally to me. And I just think that like that's like I'm not saying everybody needs to do that. It is a good conflict skill. But it's like we need people maybe who have that tolerance, like you're speaking about, to sit with that intensity of how could somebody think in this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, because I really, if we ignore it and we lambaste it and we just say, that's dumb. How could anyone believe that? That's stupid. Like,
exactly. I'm like, how could they believe that?
Anti-vaxxers, flat earthers, people who think
totally
chemtrails, water turns the frickin' frogs gay.
Totally.
Okay, let's go. I'm early internet, baby. I grew up in the era of Jean Ray's time cube. You can't fuck with me, man. I'll tell you about four-cornered seven-sided time all day, right? Like, hit me with your thing. I want to know.
Totally.
I want to know. Conspiracy thinking, conspirituality is important. If you're listening to this and you have not read Erica Lagalisa's Occult Features of Anarchism, read Occult Features of Anarchism. It will explain it. Like why conspiracist thinking has been going on for hundreds of years and why we can't write it off as dumb, uneducated people who they don't understand how vaccines work. They don't understand how. We need to know why.
Totally.
Why don't people understand? The question is,
or why do they actually maybe not want to understand it?
Why do they not want to understand it? And
totally.
As with every other thing in the world, there's history to that, and that history is intimately bound up with the history of magic. The history of science is the history of magic too. And the history of science is how we get to a point where people don't want to listen to healthcare professionals. It's fascinating.
Totally.
So I will never write somebody off for having some backwards belief. I may be pro science as the day is long, but I still, keep a bottle full of nails near my front door, and some people might think I'm nuts for that. So who am I to say?
We're complex.
I'm
complex,
man. Yeah, like
we're complex.
I'll see your flat Earth, and I'll raise you a hollow moon. I was raised in the Church of Jesus.
I think maybe I'm thinking about like my life path and how I've begun to kind of think in this way as well. And there was this guy that I met, oh my God, it was 12 or 13 years ago now. And he introduced me to phenomenology, and it was like the Rudolf Steiner anthroposophy world. And he taught me plant phenomenology, which is like basically learning how to read what a plant needs by just looking at it and feeling it and smelling it. The senses are teaching you things. And I remember he said something that like kind of changed the trajectory of my life, where he was like, there's like every epistemological approach of any system of knowledge needs to be consistently scrutinized.
Yeah.
And that seems obvious, but like I had like never, this 13 years ago, I had like never heard anyone speaking in that way, because I came from such a scientific scientism. Because there's science and then there's scientism, where you think that like science should never be criticized, and that's a whole other thing. And so this guy kind of introduced me to that way of thinking, where he was like, oh, like, everything needs to be scrutinized.
And I was like, And that intersection right there is like precisely like if I could plot on a map where I want my magic to fit like currently, it's right there. I'm looking into yeah. Yeah, I want to look into and scrutinize systems on the basis of their history and on the basis of the way their numinous aspects exert control. I want that to be, that's like where I'm hitting the pocket lately, in any case. Especially, yeah, I'm also personally really fascinated by um contemporary developments in science when it comes to things like even things I barely understand, let's be real, like quantum mechanics, which is something I hesitate. If anyone ever tells me they understand quantum mechanics, I get really up in arms. I'm reading a great book right now, one of nine, by an Italian, like a sort of occult reactionary group called Gruppo dei Non. It's called Revolutionary Demonology. It's really fun.
What?
And I've been laughing my full head off. Like I was out at a cafe waiting for a friend of mine. We were gonna do some knitting together, one of my knitting friends, and I had it with me. And he was late, and I was just reading it and reading it and reading it. And I'm like 3 bonus chapters in. I ended up, it left me with more time to read. What a blessing! And it's all the uncertainty principle. The whole thing is based around thermodynamics. And I'm like, I was so like in my head, I'm like, I thought I was gonna read a spicy demon book. Like I was so excited to figure out like what this is, how it's gonna pertain to me. And the first few chapters are like, the first thing you need to understand about magic is the laws of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is what's gonna run everything. And the uncertainty principle, as we understand it, is this sort of Da Vincian, like very Western, very Christian, like individualist mode of thinking. And then, both of these ways that we can look at physics and this particular law are so hyper individualized. And this is why trying to reach a state of balance and trying to reach a state of observational stasis is where magic goes wrong in the West. And then, of course, they introduce the work of Karen Barad. And I'm like, whoa, where Karen Barad says you can't understand any of these principles, uncertainty principles, wave particle physics, unless you take into account the measuring device as being part of the equation. It's like, okay, now I'm interested in quantum mechanics again. This is great.
Oh, yes.
Erin Barad is awesome. I hope I'm pronouncing her. I've never said her last name out loud, so it could be Barad, it could be Barad. I've added myself.
Yeah.
It's
Oh man, I can't remember this off the top of my head, but actually Rudolf Steiner has a thing that he talks about. It might be in the beginning of his agriculture lectures where he's like kind of like dogging on science, where he's like, if you don't consider the what's the word that I'm looking for? The object that is conducting the measurement and its influence on the experiment, you're not even fully looking at the full thrust of the research that you're doing. I almost feel like that encapsulates your energy of like when you're studying the clothing that the women were wearing during the Golden Dawn era. Like you're like, wait a minute, guys, there's this whole other instrument that we're not even looking at.
Yeah, it's all 400 approaches to the same location. Right. But I'm begging people to diversify their knowledge of approaches. If there's one thing that if I had one wish for everyone, it would be diversify your approaches. You don't have to change your interest.
Oh, absolutely.
Come at it a different way. Sing to it, like try something. Even an old witch like me who got taken out of science after 10th grade because I threw the entire school's curve for how poorly I did on the New York State chemistry regents. I didn't take physics. I'm 37 years old. I'm learning physics to better understand a postmodern occult manual translated from Italian. And I'm really enjoying it. So diversify your approach. There's magic in literally everything, including wave particle physics. Who knew?
Mm-hmm. Wow. You know what I'm getting this like insane urge to do right now? I want to like put your birth info in and look at your chart.
Yeah, do it.
Are you down? We don't have to spend a ton of time on it.
I just have no. I
am getting obsessed over this one thing about you, and I need to know if it's true or not.
I gave it to you before. I can give it to you again.
But we can do it on this one site that's like super fast. I literally just need to put it in. I don't have to put my email or anything. So what's your birth? Wait, do you want to say this out loud?
I'm writing it. No, I'm writing it to you in the chat.
Oh, so good.
No, I know.
I'm about to say like I was like about to be like
literally there's a Wikipedia page about me. Like a lot of the information.
I know. I'm glad that I just stopped myself because I was like, wait a minute.
Oh no. No, you're talking to the OPSEC witch. I'm the one who's interested in state surveillance. I'm not. I'm not gonna make it
Um,
easy.
what's the last four of your social? Just
Yeah, while I've got it, what's your first pet's name? That's why you this is important
what
to your
street
future
did you
design.
grow up on?
You're right in future's name.
Oh my god, I just need to see one thing about you.
I'm so curious. Please,
I knew it!
please let this be the answer. Finally, I will have an explanation. What?
There was something that you were saying earlier. You have an open G center, which is like the center of identity. And also, it's also the center of love. But I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the G center because I have it open as well. It's actually completely open in my chart. I don't know if any of these words make sense, but you have two gates on your G center, but the center is open. Mine is completely open. And when a center is open, it's like an energy center in the body. You have a lot more flexibility in that aspect of your experience. But it can also be an area that gets very easily conditioned by the world because it's not fixed. And so that G center for me, if it's totally open, that just kind of like almost like sets me up for this path of yoga
Mhm.
because I'm not like super overly attached to my sense of who I am. And so there was something that you said earlier where I was like, that's the most open G center thing I've ever heard ever. And I think it might have been something along those lines where it was like, you were saying kind of like, I don't really care about who I am. I don't know. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, sounds like me. Sounds like certain.
I think I said that.
Pretty sure. Yeah, that tracks. I mean, it's true. But what is my G center fully open or partially open or?
It's undefined, but you have two gates that are hanging off of it. Um, you also have a defined head and ajna center, just like me, and we both have the channel of abstraction, which is like we love making meaning out of the past.
That, yeah.
Does
Yep.
that track?
That's certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we both have that. And like, I'm not a human design professional literally at all. I'm only saying stuff because I have that. So I'm like, oh, I get that one.
No, there's a lot of areas of my life where whenever I start talking about them, I'm like, hang on back up. I'm an enthusiast. Please remember.
Yeah, I'm just an enthusiast at
I'm
this
an
point.
enthusiast. I'm a deep enthusiast. I'm not a professional. So what would you want if you encountered someone with those, what would you call it in humanism? Placements, aspects? What would you? I think I'm so in your embedded in the language of astrology. So like if you met someone like me who had that same structure, that same condition, what would you want to tell them about how to better live in the world based on your knowledge?
Oh, yeah, it's a really good question.
How would you advise me to angle things going forward based on what you know?
Mm. Yeah, so with like the open G center experience, it's almost like human design is interesting because maybe this is similar to astrology where it's like having a fixed center or a defined center and having an open center or an undefined center, there's a good and bad version of both. So it's not like it's like better to have it defined or better to have it undefined. So there's almost kind of like a good and bad version of each. And so when it comes to the open G center that you have, the bad version of it, and I don't know if this is true for you, but maybe even when we're younger, as we get older, we kind of start to figure out like, oh, that's not working for me anymore. But like it can be a lot of needing to prove your worth
Mm-hmm.
because you aren't so sure about who you are actually. But it's like I don't know who I am in like not a spiritually beneficial way. It's like in a like I'm confused about my place in the world. I'm confused about like who I am. And this is maybe when you were younger. I don't know. Does any of that feel like anything?
Yeah, no, most definitely. Feeling not like it was like I was missing something that everybody else had been taught
Mm.
for a really long time. Growing up feeling like,
Oh, I get that.
was I out of school that day when everyone was taught how
Mm.
to figure out what you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, I get that.
You know? Like what is, maybe I just missed, said this to someone last week, and like I often wonder what my life would have been like if I had been like everybody else. Because the unfortunate truth is, and source, my dad who's my best friend has confirmed this for me 1 million times. He's like, nope, you were literally never a normal kid. You just weren't. If I had been aligned with my peers and their vision for what they imagine being married and having children and that being enough. Imagine if falling in love and procreating and having a family, in like in literal terms, in your house that you can serve and be part of and raise kids and have a house and have those be the mile markers by which you came to understand yourself. What a world. If I could have set out on a path that I thought I understood, and obviously learned a lot along the way, it's certainly not easy. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world, but what if that was it? What if you knew? Because you always hear people say, I always knew I wanted to get married and have kids. I always knew that I wanted to be a parent. I always knew I wanted to have kids. I've never known anything. I was dumb when I woke up today. So like,
I fucking get that.
what? Imagine knowing anything about yourself ever.
I know. Now I like want to like, I'm like, I remember growing up like, yeah, I know a couple of people in my life who have always been like, yeah, I know I always wanted to be a doctor. Or I
always wanted to be a doctor. Always, my dad's in the military, so I always wanted to join the military. I grew up, loving, I always wanted to play sports. I always wanted to, and sometimes it'll lead them like, oh, I thought I was going to grow up to play professional football. And so I grew up and I became, now I coach my son's basketball team. And it's like amazing. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Not for one moment of my life have I ever felt like I know who I am or what I'm supposed to do. But her explanation, which was really illuminating, and we've talked about this a little in the past, because of that aspect of myself, I have never felt uncomfortable. Or rather, in times when I felt uncomfortable, it's been temporary and I've recognized it immediately. Yes. Because when you're hyper-fixated on one goal, whether like, literal sense or magically, you're really selling yourself short a lot of the time. If you say, the bar is here, this is the standard, this is what I want. I want $1 million. It's the most reductive example. If you say, I want $1 million, I want $1 million, I want $1 million, then maybe an opportunity for $5 million will pass you by because you decided you wanted.
Oh, real. Oh, that's so real.
Right there. That's like the metaphorical abstraction of it. Because I've never had a goal in that way for one moment of my life, I've only ever gone moment to moment. This is comfortable. This is not. And when I was younger, that not knowing who I am, feeling kind of baseless, the form that took in my life was what I've since reversed in terms of being willing to experience extreme distress and extreme discomfort, because I would say, somebody else probably wants this, so maybe I'm just being a baby, or maybe it's just me being weird. Like, I don't know, especially in relationships, like suffering bad relationships for way too long.
That's an open G center thing to do.
Yeah, being like, well, somebody else probably would like this, and maybe it's just me being abnormal and this, that, and the other. Like, being hot on fire levels of uncomfortable the entire time, which I've since learned is like, no, comfort, discomfort, as abstract terms, those are my barometers for whether or not a situation is good for me. And I've taught myself how to better tolerate the distress of uncertainty in order to be more focused on the outside world and not so inwardly like, what am I missing, lacking? Why don't I get this?
Yes.
Now I can very quickly deal in that, like, it's almost like a pendulum. Like, I've gone from having 1 million auguries and 87,000 checks and balances, divinatory systems of, okay, do I hate this because it legitimately sucks? Do I hate this because I'm abnormal? Am I lacking information? Is this my blind spot? Is it bias? Is it privilege? Is it just wrong? Is it wrong for me? Am I not good enough for this? Imposter syndrome. And now it's just kind of a yes, no. If there's one thing I do know about, I came around to a point where I realized one of the only things I know about myself is that I have no ladder of goals. Everything is about the continuation of unique experiences, no matter how long. If I'm at a job for a year, if I'm at a job for 5 years, if for 10 years.
I really relate with what you're saying, and like, I'm still actively learning a lot of this stuff. And I think what's checking out for me right now with the Open G Center is like, I'm extremely ambitious. We both have defined roots, and you actually have a defined will center, which I don't have, but our defined root connects to our spleen, which is our authority. We both have the same authority. Any of these things, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes we're both projectors. There's so many things here, but that can give us a little bit more energy than some other projectors to be able to act on our ambitions. but ultimately like we're not energy types, so that we have a little less energy than the average person, but we have the way that the defined root manifests with a projector is like we almost have this kind of like urgency feeling where it's like I need to like act on this thing. You get an idea, especially because you have the defined head and ajna just like me. It's like you get a new idea or a new thing comes up and it's almost like you jump up to grab the book. I don't know. Does that feel true? Like, or it's
Oh,
like
I mean, your
like
listeners.
ChatGPT. I'm talking to ChatGPT every 5 minutes because I get a new thing that comes in and I'm like, what do you think? You know?
Yeah, no, yeah. No, I definitely get that. My life is a series of lists and projects, and it's actually like I always saw that as a weak point, and I don't want to say like, and I've had to figure out a way to make that work for me because no, I work in service to it. I've had to acquiesce. I've had to accede to the apparent like reality that I am living in, which is that. And this is funny because this is like I keep bringing in other disciplines and stuff that I'm involved in, but this is me as a fiber artist talking as well. There's like a thing in like the knitting world or the sewing world where you talk about your WIPs, your works in progress, right?
Oh, totally.
Okay, it's like, oh, am I a monogamous knitter? Do I just like start one thing? I think I have 7 or 8 projects. One is a sweater that I looked at in a year and a half because I got mad designing a sleeve and I put it in a bag. It's right there. I can see it. That's also not counting crochet projects, sewing projects, like spinning projects, yarn that I'm actually making. Here's my spinning wheel right here, spindle. I'm sewing one garment a month this year. I have a sweater for my dad. I have a sweater for myself. I have multiple bobbins I'm spinning. Like the guilt consumes me. Like, why can't I finish anything? I talked to legacy fiber artists, especially quilting really changed the game for me in that regard. I started quilting at the beginning of the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, all of a sudden everyone was like, oh my God, I need hobbies. I'm going to bake bread and I'm going to learn to knit and I'm going to learn to sew. And I was like, I've been doing all that shit for 20 years. What am I going to do? And I had to like invent hobbies for
Yeah.
myself. I'm like,
Wait,
oh,
okay, something's coming in for me about everything that you're saying because you're saying like, why can't I finish anything? And I can relate with that on some levels. And I wonder if it's okay. So, for instance, I said earlier, like, okay, maybe some people that I knew growing up who knew that they wanted to be doctors at the age of like 12 had defined G centers, like we're saying. And like they had this defined sense of like, this is who I am. This is what the type of work I want to do in the world. This is what I want to do. And because maybe somebody who has that stronger sense of identity in what they're doing would finish the project because they feel like if I don't finish the project, I'm not that thing. Whereas like with us, I have no attachment. Even with my work, it's like I do feel very grounded in the work that I'm doing in the world, but I'm not like just saying this to flex. Like if it all fell apart, like I don't care. I would just do something else.
no, that's real.
You know what I mean? Like I feel that deeply. Like I'm like, who cares? Like I'll just do something else.
So, so now I'm gonna eat my words that I said earlier, and um I'm gonna run this back. So I will now say it. So obviously we've been joking this entire time about how this is podcast recording 1.5. And that is because we had this conversation. We had a different conversation 2.5 months ago, right? You and I sat down, we talked, and we recorded a conversation. And in that conversation, I talked woven throughout about the job that I had at that time, which I was working at a craft store here in New York and I was teaching knitting and I was running a book club and I was doing, oh, I was deeply invested in this small business that I worked for. And I talked your ear off about how cool this job has been after like decades of like I had been running departments, managing like 4 departments at a creative tech company for 5 years before that. Before that, I was literally on TV on an international broadcast network. Before that, I was a journalist. I was in bands. I was touring the world. Like it was so cool to be in this super focused space where I was focused on my craft and I was going at length with you about how important this job has been to me and how much I love my job and how much I over the moon for what I'd been doing for the last year. And the next day, I got fired completely unexpectedly, nearly no explanation, at least none that made sense. I had never even so much as gotten like a critical comment from a student or a customer in our shop. I actually genuinely loved this job so much. I was so happy to go to work every day. And out of nowhere, it was like I never even got into disagreements with my boss. Like it was just like, and we had just had a conversation a few days before about what I'm doing at the shop, and it was like a bit of friction about something, but the conversation ended with my boss being like, I don't know what I'd do without you. And then 4 days later, right after we had this conversation, it was, I know what I said last Saturday, but I've changed my mind and you're fired. And I was blindsided. I was just
So
like,
intense.
my dog had been in surgery that day, and it was 4 days before Christmas, just to add to that. Talk about realizing you don't know the people that you spend time around. Like, I had worked for this person for a year and a half. I had never seen any indication that this was how they actually felt or actually behaved.
That's pretty disturbing.
It was disturbing and distressing are like the two words that came to mind the most. However, it didn't destabilize me. And a few weeks ago, so that was like right before Christmas, and I was like, okay, I can't. Just like on the phone call, my boss had said, "Is there anything you want to say to me?" I'm like, "I don't think I can. What does it matter? You clearly made up your mind, so okay, bye." Um, I went home for the holidays. I like saw my family, and the general reaction. I'm very, very lucky at this point in my life to have such a vibrant and incredible community of friends and peers. We're just like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I know you really loved that job. You can find another job that pays you hourly." Yeah, okay, fine, that's fair. But I'm still really bummed. I'm like upset.
Oh, of course.
But then a few weeks ago, I ran into one of my like regulars who was like, I heard what happened and I can't believe it. And she was like heartbroken and she was really distressed, which is lovely of her. I wish no one would be upset ever, but whatever. She's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, honey, I'm good. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, I'm really good. And I could tell from the look on her face, and she's so sweet. I really, really like this girl. She's really sweet. I could tell it was a little uncomfortable for her that I wasn't upset.
Oh, interesting.
People, you lose a job or something in your life falls apart and people really expect. And like I had gone through, I spent a few days, I was really sad. I really liked my work. I loved teaching. I loved my little book club. I loved knowing I was working for a small upstart business. I love knitting. It's like a huge part of my craft. And I was my feeling wasn't like, oh my God, what am I personally going to do? Because I've had 87,000 careers. My feeling was like, damn it, I really liked that path. But I've been on Earth long enough to know that these things can happen. And sometimes they send you in a totally different direction. But it was when I saw this woman and I kind of got put on the spot. And what's more, we were at the library of all places. So
you're like whispering?
I don't want to talk too much. I just want to like go nice and cute. Like, are you really okay? Like, what's going to happen now? And I looked at her and I just said, for some reason, and this isn't even how I normally talk to people. So like, why was this what came out of my mouth? But what I ended up saying in an attempt to like, because you end up kind of wanting to comfort the other person. Like, no, believe me, like I'm okay. What I ended up saying to her was, I said, I don't want you to worry about me. Most of the work I've done in my life, I've worked really, really hard to build the kind of life where displacing one brick doesn't mean Jenga. Like, I'm not attached to this. Like, this has happened to me before. It'll happen again. If I let myself invert and fold and implode every time something categorically unpleasant happened to me, I wouldn't be. I've had bands break up. I've lost jobs. I've personal family like everybody else on earth, right? I said, I've worked really hard. That was just like how it came out. Like, what's the quickest way I can explain this to someone I know?
That's a great explanation.
I've worked really hard to build the kind of life that losing one brick doesn't mean Jenga. I said, I'm good. I said, I'm actually really enjoying myself. I'm working on it. As I was there picking up books like to start my research, just happy. I'm just going about my day. So that's how I feel about that attachment to identity thing. Like, I can be so excited about something and so like in my belief and thrilled and happy one day. And then the next, literally out of the blue, complete surprise. Oh my God, something awful and heartbreaking could happen. And I'm grieving it. And it feels like a huge loss. It's a loss for sure. I was sad. I'm still sad. I miss my coworkers. They're great.
Totally, yeah. And it's just like unsettling. It's like, oh my God, this trajectory is suddenly over. I thought I was on this trajectory. It's like, that's just unsettling.
What a reminder that can happen to you at any time. and usually the way I phrase it's like, you can walk out the front door of your house and an airplane can land on you.
That's true. Oh my God, these days planes are falling out of the sky.
You know, more than ever. Maybe you could be walking down the street now and a plane could just roll.
Okay, let's not unlock that fear.
With that said, I my general stance was okay. Like, I called some people in my world. I talked to my dad. He's like really easygoing, brilliant guy. I called a couple other friends called me. Like, hey, are you at work? I'm like, funny story. You know.
Hmm.
But like it's been like a month and a half now, and I've had so much fun. The one thing I will say, I'm way too good at being unemployed. I'm like really, really good.
That's because you're a projector, but
I taught myself 3 new crafts this month. Like, but I've seen my friends more than I had seen them in like the 2 years previous, and I've spent so much time. It's also so cold here in New York. Nobody wants to leave the house. I've read like 9 books, and I've spent so much time with my dogs. And my dogs are like my world.
I feel so happy thinking about this lifestyle for you.
How's your puppy?
Oh, my puppy is good. He's good. We've had a little bit of the puppy blues where it's like postpartum depression. You're like, oh, wow. We've had a little bit of that, but we're growing. We're committed. My boyfriend and I are I think that like we almost just have this thing where we unconsciously throw ourselves into challenging situations, not to test our relationship, but almost to kind of prove that we can get through shit. Like there's like stuff that happens like all the time. And so it's been
I think that's good and
ground.
healthy and awesome, by the way. I think
No, totally. It's not testing. It's not like we're trying to push each other's buttons, but it's like it's proving.
it's advancing through the game. There's video games where you could just like run around and farm crops and like talk to townspeople and NPCs and do whatever. But if you want to experience more of the world, you have to fight a boss or two along the way.
Exactly.
Like, it's the quest mentality. It's very important.
Exactly. The quest mentality. Wait, that's actually one thing that I wanted to say is you were talking about, I love what you said about like what losing one brick isn't going to like drop the whole Jenga. And it's like, I wonder if this is something that you can relate with. This doesn't even need to have to do with human design at all. But like, for me, I think one of the reasons why I don't care that much about what I'm doing is because there's something else that I'm doing that supersedes everything. And so it's like kind of like what you said before. You were like, I learned really young that I'm going to do everything within the parameters of magic. And I almost feel like as a yogi, I have like a similar mentality where it's like, well, I have my path. Like,
yeah,
that's the real thing that I'm doing. Like, who cares what my job is? I could be stacking produce.
yep.
And
And I
the same thing.
Oh, and I've worked retail. I've had 1 or 2 jobs consistently since I was 14 years old. Like
Yeah,
I've
totally.
my whole life and gone to school and toured and traveled and whatever. It's all been stones on the path that is like this magic is like the cement holding it together.
Exactly.
And when you have that, that's something I kind of wish for everybody. And you can kind of see it. I don't want to be prescriptive, but you can kind of see it when people are missing that, when you can tell they're flailing.
Oh, absolutely.
Or when they've picked something that's like a bad fit. It's like there's like a meme about that too. Like you can always tell when a guy's wearing a cowboy hat, but it's not a part of his personality. That's how I feel about a lot of the scientism people, like the hardcore atheists. It's like, oh, you have to work at this, and I can tell because every time you talk about it, it's like a fight. Like I don't have to fight. I can just kind of roll with it because I know I don't have any doubt in this arena. I don't have any doubt in this arena, and if anything ever presents itself as distressing or a struggle or a trial or a big ass inconvenience, I bring myself back to that, And it's not that very new agey, like things are being removed from your life so you can have better, bigger. That's a prosperity gospel kind of logic, and I'm not like that's not me. But at the same time, the wisest and most beautiful and most important teacher in my like magical life, the woman that I look up to more than anyone else and have been lucky, not just someone whose work I've studied extensively, although I have, but someone who I've been lucky enough to be in contact with in the past. I was going through a period of horrible upheaval many years ago, and I told her, I spilled my guts, and she said, listen, She's much less flowery and flowery about it than I am, which is awesome, which is like why I love her so much. She's like, look, when you're on that path of magic, when you say, okay, I want this, and the universe goes, yeah, are you sure? And you're like, yep, I'm gonna do magic. It will be aggressively ungraceful sometimes when things get pulled out of your path. You
Yes.
will try to steer yourself, you will be stubborn because you're a person, that's normal. You will push yourself in a direction or towards something or try to stay in a place that is not good for you. And sometimes those bad things, when the bad things happen, it doesn't have to be as vague as everything happens for a reason, which is a little, it's like, duh. Like what that reason is like not always what you think it might be. And it's not things are being taken out of your way for bigger or better. It can be really simple. It can be that like you signed up for this one thing.
Well,
And
yeah, it's like an initiation. It's like trial by fire. It's like, can you?
but over and over and over and over again. And you
Do
just
it.
accepting what the gift that she gave me when she explained this to me was the understanding that it's not about it's not, oh, I was on the wrong path. And so the universe bonked me off of it like Mario Kart really hard. And now I have to get on another path and hope that's the right one. It's being aware on some level that you are going to get bonked a lot. And that when it happens, it's likely because, or always because, you are in some way, big or small, simply being reoriented onto the path of magic. And so
Yes.
the times in my life when I've been happiest are the times when I'm the most equipped to look down and make sure that's what's under my feet all the time. And from there,
Yeah, yeah, I think the message that we're taking away is stop believing that you'll ever stop getting bonked.
yeah, you will be bonked off the
We're
path.
gonna be bonked forever.
But no one has ever quit playing Mario Kart just because they get bonked a whole bunch. Like some days you are the blue shell, some days you are the rogue, some days you are Toad. I'm Toad every day. That's that's my whole thing. If you want to be a magician, prepare to get bonked in a go-kart. That's about all I have.
I love that. I think that's a great final note.
Yeah. Certainly a logical one, especially coming from me, pioneer of logic.
No, it's good. No, I love it. I'm the queen of seeing the wisdom in the bonk. So
In the bonk. There you have it.
well,
Any last questions? I know you have to go, but
yeah, I do need to go. Why don't we just wrap up with how you would like people to reach out to you if they're super stoked about all your research projects or just want to connect?
so I'm terrible at having my life on the internet. I don't have a website. I don't have a portfolio. I don't have a resume. I'd like to make, this is my call out to the universe. If you're somebody, especially if you're in New York City and you want to play around, I am great at coming up with ways to compensate people financially and otherwise for doing crafty stuff with me. If you're a photographer, if you have websites, that's awesome. I am only one place, and that is at Graves Meredith on Instagram. Technically, I have a Twitter. I haven't looked at it in years. I have no other social media.
That's the main hub.
That's the hub.
That is the hub.
I rarely post. I do once in a while when I have something fun going on or it's an anniversary. I'm in my stories though a lot with my baked goods and my book binding and my elderly dogs. So that's what I do. At Graves Meredith on Instagram. Only way.
Cool. I love it. Well, I've got a party.
Yeah.
I gotta go party, and so
Party.
let's hit stop this recording. It's over. Oh, okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Bye. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening. The information for the guest that I brought on today is down in the description wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can see what I'm all about on my website, hannawilliams.com. That's HANNA Williams.com. Or you can catch me on Instagram at GracePilled, Grace Pilled. And I post videos and memes. That is a place where I am definitely the most active. And if you feel really inspired to dive deeper into my work, I especially recommend my Patreon, which is my massive library of everything I've ever taught over the years. And so I'll see you there, or you'll just keep listening to the podcast. Do whatever you want. You have free will as always. Thank you for being here. Be sure to check out my Patreon, which is my massive library of talks and courses that I've given over the years. And if not, just stay tuned for more episodes, and I look forward to sharing more with you. See you next time.